To acknowledge the Lekwungen-speaking people within whose traditional territory we operate. We give thanks to the Songhees, the Esquimalt, and Wasanish First Nations, whose historical relationships with this land and diverse cultural heritage continue to this day. Come on in. And, hi Margaret. We raise our hands in gratitude to the ancestors, matriarchs, hereditary leaders, and of course the artists from these lands, and we give thanks for the privilege of living and working here. My name is Kegan McFadden, and I'm the Executive Director of the Victoria Arts Council, and it's my privilege to welcome you to our rebranded project space. So this is the very first project in the project space under the banner of Another Life. And Another Life seeks to consider ideas of starting over yet again mainly through artist books. Hi, Christine. Mainly through artist books, as well as other related materials and sometimes unrelated materials. So we are very excited to welcome Cathy Busby as the inaugural guest speaker as part of this new series. And so I'll just say a little bit about Cathy so we're all on the same page. Cathy Busby is a Canadian artist based in Vancouver. She was born into a family of lifelong social justice advocates of Scottish, English, and Protestant descent, and grew up in what is known as Mississauga, Ontario. She moved to Carcross, Yukon, on her own as a teenager to be part of an alternative school, the Carcross Community Education Centre. At the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design, later in the 1980s, she made art and voiced her concerns about women's rights, including affordable housing, job equity, and the proliferation of militarism. During her MA in Media Studies and PhD in Communication, a decade later, she investigated self-help books and recovery culture as a way to think about the politics of pain, later making art about public apologies, memorials, and care within and outside healthcare institutions. In her practice, Busby has often amassed collections to create art and make meaning. Public apologies, of course, vehicle names, neighborhood posters, corporate slogans, self-help books, and portraits. She has exhibited nationally and internationally, including New York, Beijing, Melbourne, Berlin, and now Victoria. So Cathy has prepared a very illuminated discussion today, going through various artist books related to the piece that we're showing today, so kind of building the story. So the presentation is just around 40 minutes or so buckle up, and then there'll be time for questions afterwards.
And any burning questions along the way. I mean, we're just a small group, and I like the idea of not losing people along the way because I neglected to say something. So I wanted to tell you that this body of work that I'm speaking about, which is Sorry and We Are Sorry, began when I was working at the National Gallery in Ottawa. And I had just finished my PhD, and I was turning my attention back to art making, sort of informed from those years of graduate school and work. Not that I had really cut off from art making, but it hadn't been central. Writing had been central. And so in Ottawa, there were lots of newspapers, and at that time, turn of the millennium, there were still daily newspapers coming and going, and you take your break and you flip through the newspaper. And I noticed this kind of apology culture that was just kind of starting to fill up more and more space in the newspaper. And so I decided I wanted to take notes on that in a way. So, like my mother before me, I became a newspaper clipper, clipping out apology stories. And soon I had like 100 within a year or a year and a half or something, I had like over 100 newspaper clippings, and then also news stories were starting to be on the internet. And so I was also kind of gathering those as well. And so, so collecting things and reflecting on them in light of contemporary culture has kind of been my way of working for a long time. But the first thing I did was to I'm going to pass one around and show the other. So I just kind of zeroed in on the faces. I was just figuring out what I was doing, and you can imagine me standing at a color photocopier with my newspaper clippings, doing enlargements, and just kind of low-key, but making it into a little book as a way of just gathering those thoughts together. And then on the back, I in order of appearance, noted the apology. So, I am truly sorry for the pain and suffering that you have experienced for the Walkerton tainted water tragedy. Mike Harris, Premier, Ottawa Sun, January 19th, 2002. So that's the way I kind of, so they were in, this is Mike Harris, who's sorry for the Walkerton tainted water tragedy. And so that became a kind of pattern for me as this project progressed. And the next thing I did, I had an exhibition at Eye Level Gallery in Halifax in, I think it was 2003. And so I enlarged my collection of apologies. And this time, rather than having the because I had too many to have them just occupy the back of the. That's okay. Instead of having them on the back of the book, I decided to have it just practically. You know, it occupied a couple of pages, so I needed more space. And so it became a more substantial book, and I made 10 copies, a limited edition. And for me, this was a way of kind of carrying, like, okay, this is my project, I'm building something here. So rather than a more tentative, it became more clear and more certain. And then Diamond, which is an artist-run center in Gatineau, had an opportunity where you could apply for funding, and it was like a scholarship, and they gave 24 hours of technical assistance using a digital printer. And I thought, wow, this is what I need. So I applied for it, and I got it. And then, again, in that sort of spirit of building confidence in a project and occupying space, I bought a roll of Arches watercolor paper, which was 4 feet wide, and I said to the technician that I wanted these apologies to fill 4 feet in width, and however wide they needed to be. Oh, but I forgot a little point in the story, which is that before that happened, I was asked by Gallery 101 in Ottawa to participate in a resource room project. And then following that, they did a publication of the years, I think there was a year or two of people who'd participated in it, and they gave us like a new opportunity. We're gonna make a book, and you can each do a page section within the book. So I said, okay, I'm going to do I had done a self-help book project as my resource room project, and instead of building on that, I wanted to do something with the apologies. So I said, I want to print these apology images as part of this book. And the lawyer on the board said, no way, you can't do this. You don't have copyright on these images, these news images. And so I knew, I had the sense, somehow I learned that 10%, you could publish 10% of an image, and that was okay. So I said to this, I got back to the board and said, well, I only want to publish the mouths. And in these images, that's less than 10%. And so I bring this story up because I feel like that really improved my work, this project, to zero in on the mouths. And but I don't know if I would have come to that myself. I was sort of getting there, you know, with the enlargements and kind of these kind of things, but I hadn't zeroed in on this. And so anyway, they accepted that, and that was the first publication where I published just the mouths of the apologizers, and I followed the same pattern of what they said, what it was for, where they said it, very dry, but consistent, so that if you wanted to, you could read the apologies as a kind of repetitive, poetic, on their own. I always bolded what they said.
So these were large prints at this point?
Yes.
Okay, not a book, but a large print.
No, they looked like,
Okay. Oh, wow.
like that.
Okay. Wow.
Yes. So, but I printed them first as, so I used the whole roll of paper, and the first exhibition was at, the McMaster University, and if you want to pull out your phone and go to my website, like while we're talking, this is all in color, and it's all there. And then the second one. So this book shows the first one and the second one. And the second one was at St. Mary's University Art Gallery. And what was different there was I had, because of the space, again, sort of like the lawyer and the 10%, I always work with the limitations of whatever the opportunity is. So in this case, there were like no big run of walls. McMaster had this big, huge, that 1960s root architecture kind of wall availability. So I used it, and I made the big grid that looked like a big billboard, and I loved it. But St. Mary's had this broken up kind of space. And I thought, well, what's going to connect them? I need them to be connected. So I made a frieze across the top and the bottom, made of all the words. So the words, so this is the invitation to that show, and all the words from the apologies became this upper and lower frieze. And if you want to take one of these, you're welcome.
And were they pink as well? There was the frieze pink, or?
The frieze was, the walls were pink, and
Okay.
the frieze was this sort of beigey pink. And, so, another time that I showed them, this was at eye level, I had made this card, and the thing I liked in terms of, kind of expanding the vocabulary of this body of work was people went around like this at the opening. Like it was like a little mini mask, and it was like funny, right? It was just a funny thing. So, and you were sort of test driving the apology face. But the show was called Test Drive because there was other work in it that was about the names of SUVs. But that's not today's topic. So I also wanted to say that story work traveled thanks to Kegan, both to Winnipeg and as part of this exhibition called Every Line and Every Other Line. And then he traveled it to AKA, vice versa. So this is the one that happened at Platform, and this is the one that happened at AKA, paved AKA. So and what I did for the Winnipeg one to kind of make it local, I had one or two local apologies printed at their print house. I think it was an artist run, Martha Street
Studio.
Yeah, but also there was this apology by Ford motor company for this ad that they made for a truck that said "Drive it like you stole it." It was on the back page of like the Winnipeg Free Press, and there was outrage about it because Winnipeg was the car theft capital of Canada. And so I just thought that was a funny apology story. So I hired a local sign painter because at a lot of car dealerships, they, at that time anyway, they would have a painter come in and like paint the sign like 50% savings or whatever it was. So I had the painter come in and on the window of platform painted "Drive It Like You Stole It."
Talk about using available space.
Yeah,
It's like
and
a
kind
3
of.
foot by 4 foot.
Yeah, so it's like I had this, pattern in my mind, this sort of, this idea, and a toolbox growing of what I do with all this apology information, and then with every different place and different circumstance, kind of try to localize it. So I also did that show in Sydney, Australia, at the what's it called? University of New South Wales, and there I hung it in groupings as well. And what was interesting there was you could view it from outside. There was big windows, and so I kind of thought about it in an indoor-outdoor sense. And so anyway, but then the turning point where sorry became we are sorry is in 2008 when Stephen Harper and Kevin Rudd both made apologies. Kevin Rudd for the Stolen Generations in Australia, and Stephen Harper, of course, for the Indian Residential School Assimilation Project. And coincidentally, I had an invitation to go to Australia because I'd been doing residencies in China, and there were all these Australian artists there, and I made friends with Australian artists. And so my friend in Melbourne said, "You should come and do a show here." And I'm part of this collective called Ocular Lab, and it'd be great to have you. So I said, sure. So what I did was, so this is from the show that I did at Ocular Lab, and so it was the first time that I kind of drilled down into particular apologies and did a kind of comparative or compare and contrast with looking at the Rudd or the Australian and the Canadian government apologies. And this is the only time I called it righting the wrongs to apologies or anything about righting the wrongs, because I just didn't right any wrong, or it didn't work in that way. But that was where I was at that time, and that's fine. And then I edited down from their spoken apologies, I edited down to like 100 words-ish what they were saying. Because if you listened or you read the full apology text, you really had to search to get like, what exactly are they saying here? So it was my informed opinion of what they were saying, but they are like, I feel it's like part of the work was like editing it down, making it almost bite-sized, and then from the images of them giving those apologies, I took samples and I determined their in those photos the pigmentation of their skin. And so this was Harper and this was Rudd. And then I used that palette in both this work, so the wall where I presented the Harper apology had this background of painting, and then the painting of the words on top of it, the painting of the Harper words on top of it were in black, and then the same, the Rudd and those words. And you can see it nicely on my website, where the two big walls come together, and the writing kind of it's a surround, pretty much a surround. That's how it feels anyway. So it was a little space, actually not much bigger than this. Well, a bit bigger, maybe a third again, but relatively small space. But it had two long running walls. So I just worked with them. And I also made it a lot harder for myself, more challenging for myself, by deciding that I wanted to not present with vinyl on the walls. I thought it was too tentative and too overused in gallery spaces, use signed vinyl to describe a show or to give the title, and I just thought, oh, this is just too familiar and too insignificant. I wanted it to be more, this is a memorial to these, and so we used the signed vinyl, the negative of it, as a stencil for the paint, and painted the whole thing on, and it worked. But the person who worked with me on that was the partner of the friend who had said, come and have a show. And I say this kind of thing because, when you introduce me, Kegan, and you say, and Cathy's showing here and there and done this, it's like, well, it's true, but it's not like, the embassy invited me to come, and it's all about connections through the art world, through other artists, through curators, through institutions, but it's less glamorous than it sounds as a list. Anyway, so he said, I was in the Laneway Commissions project last year, and your work would really suit the Laneway Commissions. And the Laneway Commissions is where I was able to do this big work in Melbourne. So I went from the little project at Ocular Lab to a big project the next year in Melbourne. I went back, and and you can either just have a look at this, or if you want to keep these, I found a stash of them that I didn't know I had, so I'm getting ready for this. So this was a turning point in this body of work. It was a $30,000 grant to make the work, and again, just like I thought about when I was first making the Apology Mouth prints, I thought, well, how much vinyl can I buy for $30,000? And then with the Laneway Commissions, you had to find your own site. And I lived in Halifax. And so I hired somebody on the ground there. And fortunately, Google Earth was already available. And so we would look at where possible buildings were. And then the person I hired would go and find out if they were available and how much it would cost and what the terms would be. And after some work, I was just absolutely overjoyed that it was a power substation that I was able to access. And in terms of, again, keeping the work big and loud and present, I just loved that it was going to be on a power substation. And again, lawyers came into the picture because I was like, well, this is a Chinese-owned company, and I'm a little artist in Canada. And it was called City Power Corp. And so the city of Melbourne, who funded the Laneway Commissions, they made it happen. And they got their lawyers talked to City Power lawyers, and they worked it out. And I said, all I want is 6 months to have this vinyl on your walls. And the walls were empty. There was never anything on them. And they agreed, and they came back saying you can have it for 5 years. Wow. Okay. Or until the vinyl doesn't look good anymore. And then the city of Melbourne got, it's that sort of thing of energy, right? Like, people were excited about it. People at City of Melbourne were like, wow. And then they said, would you like it to be lit? Wouldn't it be great if it was lit at night? Like, what a great idea. So they found another $10,000 to throw at the project to light it so that it had this nighttime presence. And I found an architectural photographer who photographed it, and it's been my go-to photograph. But that's how it happened. That there was a kind of energy generated from that, the city power people saying, 5 years. And then, then it was worth lighting it because it wasn't just 6 months. And then City of Melbourne said, let's do a documentary. Would you like to? Because, again, it was something that was sort of started as it was a difficult thing because the Indigenous people were like, what's this white woman from Canada coming to do? And I said, well, I'm really happy to speak to them, and if they don't want me to do it, I won't do it. So anyway, there was this meeting, and they were like, well, what do you I explained where I was coming from, why I wanted to do it, how I saw it as addressing the colonialism of both countries, and both countries had practiced in this way of trying to assimilate Indigenous cultures, and making this connection. And it turned out they were like, oh, it's really good, but you need to have some Indigenous people speak. And so we hired this so the City of Melbourne found another $10,000, hired an Indigenous filmmaker, and through John Harding, he was like my liaison person, Indigenous liaison person in Melbourne, and so we hooked up with people from different walks of life, Indigenous people from different walks of life in Melbourne, and did 5 different in-depth interviews where I was talking to them about their experience as stolen generation people, how the stolen generation had affected them. And what was so nice for me in that was that this work was starting to become a backdrop for other things to happen. So John Harding, this theater guy, and also City of Melbourne decided that there had to be a publication. They'd never done a publication, but because they didn't think my work would be very easily understood, and they didn't want to do just a publication about my work, so there were like 5 or 6 artists in the year's selection of people, doing projects around this part of the city. And so they said, well, we're going to do a publication. Found another $10,000. And so John Harding, this guy who I'd been hooked up with through, trying to, make it comfortable or see if it was going to be comfortable for me to do that work. So then he wrote a piece about my work, which isn't at all about the work. It's about them and how this apology had hit and how useless it was and how all the things that had not been solved yet and how they're keeping on fighting and we're going to keep on fighting. And so again, the work became like this backdrop for these other voices. So I was really pleased about that. And there you have the Rudd and the Harper mouths standing in for those apologies. If anybody wants to look at these. So the years went by, the work was up, and then then there was one more little thing that happened that I think I have time to say. Yes.
Absolutely.
Aw, thanks. So some of you may know A.A. Bronson from General Idea, and A.A. was running Printed Matter, as he did for many years, in New York, and I knew him from here and there. He'd invited me to do some work with, when he was at Union Theological Seminary, he was doing a master's there, and he'd invited me to do a project. So we were reacquainted as art colleagues, and then, but he was also the director of Printed Matter, and he was running this series called Artists and Activists, and he said, would you like to do something for it? I was like, yeah. So what I wanted to do, okay, so the way this worked was whatever project you did, it went out with every sale that was made at Printed Matter. So if you online ordered or you went in the store and you bought something, you got a copy of whichever was the current artists and activists folder, Printed Matter. And so, yeah, really nice. And and they published like 2,500 copies. So anyway, so I did, this is the Canadian apology, and it's screen printed. So they still actually smell to this day. They were printed in 2009. So there it goes, and then you go here, and turn it this way, and we start again with the Australian one. And I was so pleased with that. That was my innovation with this project, was the idea of, you know, our countries being up and down, and then this turning over like that.
Nice.
And yeah, and also printing on black. I didn't know how that was going to work, and it had to be printed 3 times. It was quite a struggle, and still some of them are like out of line, but at least it's as good as it got. But it's pretty lovely. Like it's got a little sheen for those of you who are. Yeah, and see, I really wanted something that was like something like a keepsake or a little bit special. So anyway, and they're all in envelopes, and if you special people want to have one, you can have one. I'll just pass them around. If you don't, like, I completely understand.
I really want one.
So, and the little color preference.
Thank you for the gold.
So, yeah, and I wanted them to be wanted, you know, I wanted them to be a desirable thing. But you will also notice in the fine print, the pièce de résistance of this project for me was that I had been asked by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, who had seen images. They had art scouts looking for artists' work for the launch of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 2010. And those scouts had seen my work online from Melbourne, and that had been photographed by this architectural photographer, and it looked really good. And they asked me if I would like to do something in Winnipeg for the launch of the TRC. And I said, yes, I would. And where would I like to do it? I said, the Winnipeg Art Gallery. And they said, we'll see what we can do. But in the meantime, I got the TRC to buy into this project. So this is jointly published by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada and Printed Matter New York. And to me, that making that link and having it in, you know, that all these people who bought something from Printed Matter, who received this, and you and whoever else, they see this link, which I thought was just in my sense of what I want to accomplish as an artist in this world, that was very satisfying. And then I got so then I did the work at the Winnipeg Art Gallery, and again, I wanted to have it wrap the outside of the gallery, just like I had wrapped. I wanted it to kind of match, like pennant pieces, like the power station, and then the Winnipeg Art Gallery with its, you know, sort of slice design. You know, I thought it'd be really lovely, but it turned out that the building envelope was protected by heritage, blah, 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 and they had already heritage policy, and they had put too many pins into the outside face, and they were really worried. They didn't want any more damage to the surface. So after much debate, it was determined that this was not possible, even as an exceptional thing. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do? So I asked them if I could have the interior lobby, and I would make it in fabric. It was printed on it's a die coupler process. Hi. And so it was printed on fabric, and then it was hung in the gallery by Velcro. So there were 2 big walls, to work with, kind of like at McMaster, like nice, huge walls. And they were 25 feet high. So I had the work made 25 feet high.
Wow.
And each of the panels was 40 to 45 feet in width. And so it was this, almost the very same size as in Melbourne, but it was in fabric and it was, and it was indoors. So I was just as happy. In fact, I think it was better because, well, it was better for me because I got to explore another material way of doing it, and to also just see how it worked with the audience. And then this minor art miracle happened in terms of what I hope for in my work, which is that Justice Murray Sinclair and the commissioners Lois Wilson and Wilton Littlechild decided to have the launch of the preview at the gallery with my work as the background. So it became like it was the background. So for CBC News and all the media people that were there, that was it. And I got a big thank you from Justice Murray Sinclair and the commissioners for creating the work.
Nice.
So
How was
anyway.
it printed?
It's die coupler process, so it was 10-foot wide fabric, and it was printed in Winnipeg, not far from the WAG, and it was a process that I learned about there. Oh, I'd learned about it in China, but when I asked about it, the way that it was done in Canada, I had to there were signs for hockey games at the big hockey place. Arena. And great big huge banners with like a great big huge hockey player, on the on the picture as a picture, and it looked beautiful, and it had been up for months, and I was like, this looks like the material. This looks just like the material I'd seen in China. So then I found out what it was and how it was done and how much it cost to do, and it was all very doable. Yeah. So there's nice pictures of that on my website too, and it's just called We Are Sorry Winnipeg. Okay. So then a few years later, I was asked to do. So there's the Melbourne project again, but I was okay. The vinyl had its day, and now I had a new problem, which is that in Australia you have to responsibly dispose of any material. They're very fussy about disposal. You couldn't just like throw it out. And I didn't want to anyway. I had sort of been imagining over those years that it was up. It was up for 3.5 years. I was imagining like mailbags or like some kind of tunic dress thing, or I was imagining different sort of ways that I could recycle this material, this like 25 foot by 40 foot. It's big, really big, 2 of them. And what happened was I was invited to do a show at the Belkin Art Gallery as part of the Witnesses exhibition, which was about residential schools. My place in that was to do it in the library, the Kerner Library, some of you might know, and they had a series of art projects there. And so I took a piece that would fit into the largest wall available in the library, which there weren't very many of. It was pretty crowded with plants and computers, but it ended up that I cut the piece that says "We are sorry," and it goes up to the line that says "spiritual," something like that. Filled the wall between the elevators on the ground floor at the Kerner Library. And then what I did with the rest of all this material was had a little team of enthusiasts, and we cut it up into all these pieces, and I've been giving them away ever since. So they float around in the world, and so this is the one that Kegan chose.
Oh, nice.
And you can also, one of the fun things about it is that you can, if you go to a picture of it, maybe not so easily here, but certainly on the website where you can enlarge it, you can find where your piece is from. You know, you can find like the puzzle piece. And you are all invited to take one at the end of this. And because there were like 1,000.
Yeah.
There are still several hundred.
And a fair job cutting them up.
Oh, it was a big job.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some people frame them. But what I like, I mean, I like a lot of things about it, but I really like that they've been a long way. You know, they were up and they lived in Australia in the sun and the rain and whatever for a long time. So, and then they came back and they were part of that show. And for that show, in addition to these that were stacked and people could take them away, there was also this folder that again gave the apology, gave the Australian apology on the back page, the same old words that I kept on. I just, that's my version of the apology, and then talked about related news stories since the 2008 Canadian apology for Indian residential school to Indian residential school survivors. So all these like Idle No More and all the kind of protests and all the all the sort of using of that using of the apology as a kind of a place of discourse, really. So I wanted to note those because, of course, they're links and they would die in time. They would be eliminated in time. And so I thought this gave a kind of historical reference for that time, especially between the time that the apology was made and the time that the TRC came out with the calls to action, which was, I see it as a different chapter. And it's a different chapter in my work, and I'm not going to talk about it today. And then these are Australian, it's sort of parallel, again, keeping that parallel alive, the Australian stories, news stories that came out related to the stolen generations. And then because it was happening in the library and I was keeping myself, as I try to, you know, alert to where I'm actually, where the work is. So then UBC Libraries Resources on Indian Residential Schools and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So, and that was composed by the people at the library. They said, you know, like we did it by searching and then had it inspected or whatever, reviewed. So I brought enough copies, and everyone can have one of these if you want. And this makes a really nice pair, actually.
What's your relationship with the TRC now? Like it's housed at the University of Manitoba in the new wing or whatever they're calling it there. But I wonder, do they have a copy of everything you've done around this? Or?
I don't know. That's a good point. I'll look into that.
We'll figure it out.
So after that show, my friend and studio neighbor, he had the next door studio to myself and my late husband Gary Kennedy at UBC, and we were there. Both of us were there for about 6 years. So we got to know each other, and so Bo asked me if he could have that piece of vinyl that had been up in the library, and so I said yes, and I wanted to make it kind of official. So we had this little, like I gifted it to him at, this is the graduate studies, this is the MFA common room. And he and one of his co-workers brought the copper shield that they were planning to shame the government. They were planning to do a shaming ceremony. And they wanted to have this piece, Bo wanted to have that piece from the library. So I gave it to him. And as I said, it's like roughly this kind of section. It's about a quarter of the whole surface of the work. And what I loved was that they traveled. This was Awalaskanist 2. It was called Journey of Truth and Unity. And it was a journey from UBC to Ottawa. And they stopped along the way and they did various ceremonies with different communities along the way. And then in Ottawa, where this is, they did a shaming ceremony where they took a copper shield and they broke it, which is to indicate it's an ancient ceremony that they had deployed in order to speak to the federal government about how the contradictions of having the apology and what had been going on since the apology. For instance, natural resource extraction without permission, no honoring of free, prior, and informed consent, that kind of thing. Big stuff, like it really matters. So they made a display of it and a ceremony of it, and broke that shield, and then they took they folded it up so it just said sorry, and put the copper on it that they had broken off from the shield with all that pounding that you saw, and they left it on the steps of Parliament Hill. And so that piece was I thought that was a really strong thing to do. And but anyway, I really liked that the work became a ground cover where it had always been like up high and not actually like, well, it had been touchable at the Belkin version, but prior to that, it had been vertical, and now it was on the ground. It was covering the ground. It was actually protecting the ground from their ceremony being stopped, because as they pounded the copper, it broke the concrete, but nobody knew. The security people didn't know until afterwards when they lifted it up. And their ceremony, both said to me, the ceremony would have been stopped if we'd been doing it on concrete and we had broken the concrete, we would have been damaging property. But they couldn't see it because it was underneath the vinyl. And so it allowed the ceremony to be completed, which was, I really liked that use of the material as well as a protection of doing this ceremony. So, and it also was a kind of framing device for the media, because as they shot photos of it, it spoke. It I don't know if you want to. It's yeah. So this book was that I'm just going to finish by telling you about this show, which was called Lalakanus, Journey of Truth and Unity, and it was a documentation at UBC of the journey. And since my work, the piece that had been on the ground there was destroyed by the security people at the Parliament Hill, destroyed or disappeared, whatever, it disappeared. But the copper, actually, funnily enough, was returned to Beau and people through the Museum of Anthropology, or what's it called there now? That used to be called the Museum of Canadian History or something. Harper renamed it. Yeah. Anyway, so they got the copper back, but I guess the vinyl wasn't seen to be have value like the copper. So anyway, Beau asked me if I would make a new piece for the exhibition that was at the Belkin. And so what he wanted me to do, he said, I want the whole apology, not just partial. So here is the partial, right, on the ground on Parliament Hill. And then in the sort of memorial exhibition, I made this to scale of this. So this piece that is housing a number of cultural belongings, but in a more displayed kind of way, not in an active ceremony way, is on a piece that's that's just like this, only 11 feet.
And it's the same material type of thing.
Yes, it is. Yeah. So that's my explanation of the way I went from gathering apologies like this to having a piece that that started as in the little former corner store turned gallery in Melbourne, and then with doing the large version, how it kind of had another whole life. So yeah.
That's great, thank you, Cathy. So we do have time for questions, or if you want to elucidate on any moments. I was thinking back to when we worked together in Saskatoon, and so if you're not familiar, Saskatoon has an interesting situation where two artist-run centers bought what used to be a Chinese restaurant, and so it's a big low-lying building, and they're kind of split in half. AKA is on one side and Cave is on the other. But there's this huge billboard that crosses both, and often an artist would be invited to do just the billboard or just a show, and I sometimes convinced them to give Cathy both a show and the billboard. And Cathy at the time, reflecting on, it was around 5 years since the official apology, and so this is the piece she made for the billboard, which delineates all the funding cuts that the Harper government had implemented to Indigenous.
We need that in Victoria now.
Yeah, but to Indigenous-led organizations nationally since his apology. So, and it's very colorful too, which is another strategy you use often.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's nice to.
And also, these cuts had slyly been done slowly over months. And what I did was created a news story out of it by creating a billboard that brought them all together. And many of the organizations had been cut by 100%. They're listed here with the cuts. And it was really bad. And then the Anishinaabe News, a Northern Ontario paper, used it as their cover story. It's an Indigenous newspaper, and they talked about this. They used it. So I was really pleased about that. That it became a kind of a gathering point, out of which the conversation got some energy. Yeah, so I knew, or Kegan told me we would probably be a smallish group, and so I brought, I thought, well, I can do giveaways, so which you can't do when there's a whole pile of people. So and I'm just offering that if you would like to take pieces of this or whatever I have many copies of, you're welcome to do that. And I'm also really interested in questions. Yeah. Well, I think I was separating the images and the text from the beginning, and then kind of reuniting them at different points for different purposes. When I was first experimenting here at the Yukon Arts Center I tried having image and text together, and I was kind of like, it's okay, it's a good try. And I liked the two colors. I really liked that. But I was kind of on the fence about having the visual and the textual. So my next move was the Melbourne corner store space. And then when we painted it on the wall, and it was like, this is way better. So for what I wanted to accomplish, it didn't give room for the delight of the spectacle of a big print that has a really pretty kind of dot pattern and I don't know. There's, I mean, I still like these prints. I still think they're worthy and they're interesting, but it's a different line. I wanted to create a kind of a more somber statement when and so I kind of ran with that. Yeah.
I think it's good.
Yeah, Brian. Yeah, I leave that to the viewer reader, but the reason I was attracted to working with apologies in the first place was I couldn't believe the kind of real estate, newspaper real estate that they were occupying, whether they were consequential or inconsequential. So the amount of space that, marital infidelity apologies would occupy, like for instance, well, of course Clinton, because Clinton was Clinton, but even with much more minor players, it would be like the same amount of space as the Indian residential school apology, or maybe not, there was more coverage of that, but certainly like the Walkerton, that was like really serious thing. And so I found that confusing was kind of part of what we're living with more now, of confusing information, like what's important here, and having to tease out whether this is just more on the salacious side, or stories that are just compelling and sell papers, or that there's really something of consequence here. And that kind of mixing up was something that I wanted my work to address. Well, that's where I think it's really important that that there are conversations about historical apologies, and yeah, I think they're very important. Some of them in some ways, and like I think the Canadian apology, with its promise of and followed through on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the 94 calls to action, like that is having it is actually reshaping policy and reshaping things. I mean, it's not the be all and end all, but it has made a big difference in my my view, not just my view, but my fairly well-read view. At the same time, there's a lot of noise in that discourse, in the apology discourse, and the apology Art Mickey we were talking about. He's in this.
That's Roy Mickey's chapbook about Roy Keruka.
Right.
But Art Mickey was Roy Mickey's brother.
Yes.
Art Mickey, a lawyer and advocate, and then was leading the charge for the official apology
for the Japanese internment camps,
yeah.
And that was the first historical apology in Canada. And it's unlikely that the Indian residential school the Indian residential school apology would have happened had there not previously been a historical apology, where the implications are there's going to be, it's going to cost. There's going to be a price tag attached to it, and yeah.
And then I guess also just thinking, after seeing an artist talk at Winnipeg, there was an artist discussing how groups that are implicated in, for instance, uranium mining in southern Alberta that was used to bomb Hiroshima, the indigenous groups there got a grant, funded their own trip to go and be sorry, this came from our community. We really didn't have anything to do with it, but we just felt like we should come here. And that's so
amazing.
I always thought that was Saskatchewan.
Because maybe it was Saskatchewan. I'm sorry, I might be reading it correctly.
It's only a few miles down.
Yeah.
But yeah. I just thought that was interesting. interesting.
Yeah,
Like,
thanks for-
people really like going out of their way and doing their own apologies.
Yeah. I've kind of, like in the last few years, apologies haven't really, they haven't been central for me anymore. So I've sort of fallen off the wagon with keeping up with the, with the discourse. But
I think it's great. I really like enjoyed your work.
thank you, thanks. Yeah.
So I find it interesting that Harper does this apology, right? And then you're finding all these cuts, right? And then with Australia, you show this piece, and then they don't let you discard it, right? Like how Harper discarded the apology, right, by doing these cuts, and then that this has to go somewhere, it has to live on, right? And I think that's so interesting of there's something there that's really, I'm
So
really
the
curious.
Australian government sent it back to Canada.
There's something
And then it went all the way back to Parliament Hill, where it was spoken.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When was the last time, going back to what Linda was asking, when was the last time you showed the portraits? Wait, if you want to call them that, the mouths? Because you were
would
showing
have
them
been
quite
Berlin.
extensively.
Yeah, I showed them at Emerson Gallery in Berlin in 2014. And there, it was all apologizing politicians, because the gallery where I was showing it was about like a stone's throw from the Reichstag. You could see it. It was actually a building that was, the reason it was used as a gallery was it was on hold for government expansion. And this entrepreneurial person had managed to claim it for a gallery. It was a beautiful gallery space. So I made a billboard kind of grid of them, and I made a couple of local German apologies. And of course, the Willy Brandt apology was a very important one for the apology for the Holocaust. It was like a landmark 1970, early 70s apology. So it was kind of nice to be able to do it in the German capital. That was the last time. Yeah.
So one of the things I'm curious about is, so as this project was going on, obviously you had other things that you were doing as well. I'm sort of like, how much of your practice was involved with the apology versus other work that you were doing? I'm just asking that as an artist. Like, I'm sort of curious. Did you sort of have this going on, like you constantly, and then you have other projects? How do you work? Just how do you do it?
Well, I respond to opportunities. I keep myself open to being asked to do things, and then the best fit is what I go with.
Right.
So.
Was this a fairly big part of your practice, I guess, maybe is what I'm asking, this particular project? Is it a big part of your practice?
It's turned out to be,
It's turned out to be quite a
because
big part,
over time it's accumulated.
Yes.
But I've also done, I have a couple of other bodies of work that have also accumulated over time. Check out my website. I'm very proud. I in the last year I redid my website, and it's singing, if I do say so myself.
I know some of your other projects, but I'm thinking, so this
But
is the
yeah,
way
like my
this is kind of the
SUV.
way you tend to work, is that you have these projects that sort of go on over a long period of time. And they're sort
So
of running
for
it.
instance, I have one going on now, which I hope to realize soon. Realize the next iteration soon, where and it's like I started it in the first time was in around 2011, and it's about cars and traffic and our kind of sense of worship of the vehicle and inability, even though it would really help with carbon emissions if we had fewer cars and didn't have to own them and could share them more and all that kind of stuff. So I was wanting to address that, and so I collected the makes and models of all these cars that were parked on Gottingen Street in Halifax. This was in 2011, where I was a mentor for a program that iLevel ran, and then the mentors and the mentees both showed their work. So it was like I had to do a little something, and so I took it as an opportunity to do something new. And I gathered all the names of the makes and models of cars parked on Gottingen Street, which is a fairly long street in Halifax, at a particular time, on a particular day. So it was kind of like and then I made a big long strip, floor to ceiling, of all the names of all those cars parked on that street at that time. And it was just about like, how many cars does one street need? You know, it was like just one street, and it had like, I don't know, 150 cars on it parked or something like that. And then there were all the names, which, you know, were kind of like strange in their own names, in their own ways. And I started categorizing them. Like there were the names that were like Sonic, like Sonata and Fiesta, and then there were the names that were you know, tough and sporty, and so then I kind of got onto my most recent thing is that like last year, I was asked by someone who was doing a master's in like an MFA, a low residency one in Liverpool. And meanwhile, she was doing a project in Vancouver on the downtown east side where she worked, and she knew this church where she had done some sound recordings, and I was like, oh, I really want this. I want all these names of cars to be sung in a church. Maybe this is an opportunity that I can get a way in to a church. And so I went and met with her, Jenny, my friend who was doing the MFA, and we went and met with the minister of the church and got the go-ahead. So now, then I did this one other time, but I did it at UBC, and it was just, it was in a big gallery space, in the AVA space. It didn't have that, I wanted this kind of more reverence. I wanted to make that alignment between, you know, like a secular culture and this kind of religion of car worship. And so anyway, now I'm going to be able to do it in a, yeah, let me talk. You're welcome. So I'm now just hoping to get permission to, or not permission, I've got the permission, I just have to find the singers. And I may end up hiring them. I hired them last time, but then I just had the 4 singers, 4 parts for a madrigal. But what I want is a whole choir, so I'd like to hire the lead singers and then have other singers. It's quite an organizational job, but I want to have it happen in that church. It's at Gore in Cordova. It's a big white church, Art Nouveau, Goth kind of structure. So anyway.
Wonderful.